Welcome to HardScript.
She said it again while scrolling on her phone, not even looking up from the glow lighting her face in the dark bedroom. She said she was too tired. She had work tomorrow. Her voice sounded automatic, like a line she had practiced long before she got home. It was the 47th night in a row. I remember that number because earlier that day I had been kneeling on a hot roof, drilling brackets into concrete while counting screws in my head to stay focused. Numbers were simple, measurable, predictable, unlike the quiet space growing between us every night. Our bedroom smelled faintly like detergent and bakery sugar. It always did after her shifts. She tossed her work hoodie over the chair and pulled the blanket higher, turning her back to me before I even finished setting my alarm. I said okay. Same word I always used. Same calm tone. She didn't notice anything different. The room stayed quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner I had installed years earlier, back when we still slept tangled together under the same blanket. Earlier that evening we had stopped by the bakery so she could grab something she forgot. I had waited by the counter while she disappeared into the back with her manager, Jason. I knew him. I had shaken his hand before. Once, during a rainstorm. He had even given me a ride home when my van broke down. He used to look me straight in the eye when we talked. That night, he didn't. He stood behind her while she grabbed her bag from the office. Close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Close enough that he kept talking even when she stepped away, like the conversation belonged only to them. When we left, she said they had been short-staffed again. Another long week. Another reason she was exhausted. Now she lay in the dark, already turned away, phone face down on the nightstand. I stared at the ceiling and counted the slow rotation of the fan blades until the number settled in my chest like a final receipt. 47. I didn't ask again. Not that night. Not the next one. Not the one after that. I just stopped reaching first. The first week after I stopped reaching for her, nothing changed. Emily still came home smelling like flour and cinnamon, still dropped her bag by the door, still said she was exhausted before she even sat down. She moved around the kitchen with quick, practiced motions, telling me about difficult customers and broken ovens, about how Jason had to stay late again because someone called out. She said his name more often than she realized. In the mornings, I started leaving earlier. I told her I picked up extra installations across town. That part was true. Summer meant broken air conditioners and overheated houses. People opened doors looking desperate, grateful to see someone who could fix what was failing. At home, I fixed nothing. One evening, I stopped by the bakery again. I told her I would grab coffee and wait so we could drive home together. She hesitated just long enough for me to notice, then smiled and said that would be great. Inside, the place was half empty. Emily stood behind the counter laughing at something on Jason's phone. He leaned in close, one hand resting on the stainless steel counter beside her hip. When he saw me, his smile faded, not completely, just enough. He nodded at me without meeting my eyes. Emily straightened, brushed invisible crumbs off her apron, and said they had been discussing schedules. She said he was thinking about promoting her, giving her more responsibility. More late nights. Jason said they made a good team when they closed together. He said it casually, but he watched my face while he did. I nodded back and took my coffee to a corner table. I did not interrupt. I did not step between them. I sat there and watched the way she forgot I was in the room. When we drove home, she talked about the potential promotion, about how proud I should be. I kept my hand steady on the steering wheel and told her that sounded good. That night, she said she was too tired again. I said okay. And for the first time, she studied my face a little longer before turning away. I did not check her phone. I did not follow her car. I did not ask anyone at the bakery what was going on. I just paid attention. When you spend your days installing systems inside walls and ceilings, you learn to read small signs. A faint vibration in a vent. A smell that does not belong. A draft where there should not be one. Emily's routine started shifting in ways that did not match her words. She said they were short-staffed, but her paychecks did not change. She said she was exhausted, yet she started wearing different perfume on workdays. Not strong, just enough to cover something else. One afternoon, I finished a job earlier than expected. The client paid in cash, and I decided to surprise her with lunch at the bakery. When I pulled into the lot, her car was not there. It was a weekday. She had told me she was covering an extra shift. Through the front window, I saw Jason behind the counter. He was talking to one of the cashiers, leaning close, relaxed. No rush. No chaos. I did not go inside. Instead, I drove around the block and parked across from a small strip of buildings a few minutes away. There was a laundromat, a nail salon, and a studio rental with blackout curtains. I had installed an AC unit there once the previous summer. Emily's car was parked near the side entrance. I stayed in my truck with the engine off. I did not feel anger. I felt still. After a while, the side door opened. Jason stepped out first, checking his phone. Emily followed a few seconds later, adjusting her jacket. They did not touch, but they stood too close for coworkers. He said something that made her smile in a way I had not seen at home in months. They left separately. That evening, she came back smelling like sugar and something sharper beneath it. She said she was too tired again. I said okay. And that was the night I began making arrangements she did not know about. I did not confront her after the studio. I adjusted. The next morning, I left before she woke up. I used to make coffee for both of us, set her mug by the sink the way she liked it. That day I rinsed only my cup and walked out quietly. By the time she texted asking if I had already gone to work, I was halfway across town installing a unit in a new apartment complex. She wrote that she had barely slept. She wrote that she missed having breakfast together. I responded that I had an early start. From that day on, I changed my schedule whenever I could. I picked up jobs farther away. I volunteered for weekend installations. I stopped asking what time she would be home. At night, when she said she was too tired, I no longer rolled toward her. I stayed on my side of the bed and scrolled through job listings for commercial contracts. I let the silence stretch without trying to fix it. After a couple of weeks, she began watching me instead of her phone. One evening she asked why I had not tried in a while. She said it lightly, almost joking, but her eyes stayed on my face longer than usual. I told her she had been tired. She laughed and said that was not what she meant. I did not ask what she did mean. A few days later, she came home earlier than expected. Jason's car was not in the bakery lot when I drove by on my way from a service call. That night she moved closer to me in bed, her hand brushing my arm as if testing something. I stayed still. Her hand lingered for a moment, then pulled back. In the dark, I could feel her awake beside me, waiting for me to turn toward her. I did not. The next morning, she asked why I felt so distant. I told her I had adjusted. She did not smile. The day she asked why I felt distant, I signed the lease. The property manager slid the papers across the desk in a small office that smelled like fresh paint and carpet glue. The unit was near a new commercial site where I had been offered a long-term contract. It was closer to my jobs, quieter, practical. I told him I needed the place furnished and ready within the week. He said that would not be a problem. When I got home that evening, Emily was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed. She watched me set my tool bag down like she was studying a stranger. She said she felt like I was slipping away. She said she did not understand what had changed. I told her nothing had changed. I told her I had simply stopped asking for something she did not have the energy to give. She looked at me for a long time, waiting for more. There was nothing else. Over the next few days, I began moving small things into the spare room. Extra clothes, work boots, a charger. I did it quietly, between jobs, while she was at the bakery. I stopped leaving my wallet on the kitchen counter. I kept my keys in my pocket. She started coming home earlier again. She would stand in the doorway of whatever room I was in, watching me scroll through estimates or check supply orders. Once, she said Jason had been transferred to help at another location for a while. She said it like news I should react to. I nodded and asked if she wanted dinner. That weekend, I saw his car parked outside the studio again. On moving day, I loaded my truck in the afternoon while she was at work. I left the furniture we bought together. I took only what I had brought into the marriage and what I needed for the next contract. I placed my key on the kitchen table. Before driving away, I sent her one message. She had been tired. I stopped asking. She called before I reached the highway. Her name flashed across the screen again and again while my truck merged into traffic. I let it ring. A message came through. Then another. She wrote that she had just walked into the house and saw the key on the table. She wrote that she did not understand what was happening. She wrote that we needed to talk. I kept driving. By the time I reached the new apartment, my phone was full of missed calls. I carried my toolbox inside first, set it down by the door, and looked around at the empty living room. It echoed when I closed the door behind me. She showed up that evening. I did not tell her the address. She must have checked the joint account and seen the rent payment. When I opened the door, She stood there in her bakery hoodie, eyes red but steady. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited and looked at the half-unpacked boxes along the wall. She asked if this was some kind of punishment. She said I could not just disappear like this. I told her I had not disappeared. I had simply moved closer to work. She said that was not the point. She said couples fight. Couples fix things. She asked why I had not even tried to argue. I reminded her that for weeks she had said she was too tired. I told her I respected that. She paced across the room, hands moving as she talked about stress, about long shifts, about feeling pressured. She never mentioned Jason. When she finally stopped, she asked if there was someone else. I said no. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything she had said. She looked at me like she was waiting for anger, for accusations, for something she could push against. I gave her nothing. When she left, she did not slam the door. She closed it carefully, like she was afraid the quiet might break. A week after I moved out, Jason stopped showing up at the bakery. I did not hear it from Emily first. I heard it from Mike, a subcontractor I sometimes worked with, whose sister picked up night shifts there. He mentioned over lunch that the manager had been let go after some internal issue with scheduling and complaints from staff. He said corporate had stepped in quietly. No scene. Just gone. That evening, Emily texted me. She wrote that work had been chaotic. She wrote that people were talking. She asked if we could meet somewhere neutral. We met at a small diner halfway between my new place and the bakery. She looked different without her uniform, like she had dressed carefully but did not know for what. She said Jason had been seeing someone from work and it had created problems. She said she had not known how serious it was. She said she had felt pressured, confused, overwhelmed. She never said his name and hers in the same sentence. I listened. She asked if I had known. I told her I had seen enough. Her hands tightened around her coffee cup. She said she had not meant for things to go that far. She said she thought she could control it. She said she had believed I would always be there. I did not argue. When the waitress brought the check, I paid and stood up. She asked where this left us. She asked if I was coming home. I told her I already was home. Outside, the evening air felt cooler than it had in weeks. She stood by her car longer than necessary, like she expected me to change my mind before she opened the door. I did not. As I drove away, my phone stayed silent. For the first time in months, no one told me they were too tired. After Jason disappeared, the messages from Emily changed. They were no longer defensive or confused. They were careful. She began sending photos of small things from the house. The dog sleeping by the door. The coffee mug I had left behind. The dent in the hallway wall from when we moved in and misjudged the couch. She wrote that the place felt too quiet. She wrote that she had not realized how much space one person could leave behind. I did not rush to answer. When I did respond, it was simple. I told her I was busy with work. I told her the new contract was going well. I did not ask about her shifts. One afternoon she called and said she had requested different hours. She said she could not stand closing anymore. She said staying late made her anxious. She asked if we could talk somewhere private, not a diner this time. I agreed to meet at the house. Walking back into that living room felt like stepping into a paused scene. The furniture was the same, but the air felt thinner. She had cleaned everything. The counters were spotless. The bedroom door was open, sheets freshly changed. She stood in the kitchen, hands resting on the edge of the table where I had left the key. She said she had ended everything. She said there was nothing left with him even before he lost his job. She said she had confused attention with connection and now understood the difference. I listened without interrupting. She stepped closer and said she had asked why I felt distant, because she could feel me slipping before I ever moved out. She said the night I told her I had adjusted was when she realized she had lost control of something she thought would always be there. I did not move toward her. She asked if there was still a chance. I told her chances do not disappear overnight. They fade quietly. She did not cry when I said that. She stood there, absorbing it, like someone hearing a diagnosis they already suspected. Over the next few days, she started showing up in places she never used to. One afternoon, she came by one of my job sites with sandwiches, standing awkwardly near the truck while I finished sealing a vent. She waited until I climbed down before handing me the bag. She said she remembered I used to skip lunch when I was busy. I thanked her and went back to work. Another evening, she invited me to dinner at the house. She said she had taken the day off. When I arrived, the lights were warm, the table set the way it used to be during holidays. She had cooked my favorite meal. not rushed, not distracted. During dinner, she talked about transferring to a different location. She said she wanted a fresh start somewhere no one knew her. She said she understood now that small decisions stack up, and one day you look around, and the person who mattered most is gone. She did not blame stress. She did not blame him. After we ate, she walked me to the door. The hallway felt narrower than I remembered. She stopped in front of me and said she had thought I would yell when I found out. She said she had expected anger, accusations, something loud she could fight against. She said my silence had been worse. I told her I did not leave because I was angry. I left because I was done asking. Her shoulders dropped at that. Not defeated, just aware. When I stepped outside, she did not follow me this time. She stayed in the doorway, watching as I walked to my truck. The house lights stayed on long after I drove away. A few evenings later, she came to my apartment without warning. There was no urgency in the way she knocked. No pounding, no desperation. Just a steady rhythm that told me she had decided something before she arrived. When I opened the door, she looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in the way she held herself. She stepped inside and glanced around at the half-furnished space, the folding table I used as a desk, the work boots by the wall. She said she had spent the past week alone in the house. She said the silence there felt different now. Not peaceful, heavy. She said she had walked into the bedroom one night and realized she could not remember the last time she had reached for me first. She stood in front of me and said she had mistaken consistency for something that would never run out. She said she had treated my presence like background noise. She said when I stopped asking, she finally heard it. I listened. She did not ask me to move back in. She did not promise anything dramatic. She said only that she was ready to do the work, wherever that meant starting. She said she understood if I chose not to come back. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot below. The world outside moved the same as always. Cars pulling in, doors closing, people going home. When I turned back to her, I told her I had not disappeared. I had just stopped showing up where I was not respected. The words landed between us without heat. She nodded slowly. I told her if there was going to be anything between us again, it would not be built on convenience. It would not survive on excuses. It would require effort from both sides, every day. I did not step toward her. I did not step away. And for the first time in a long while, she did not say she was tired.